Baby, this is Keke. Hello, guys. Keke here, and we have just so much to get into today, okay? Literature, race in America, theories galore. We are going to uncover the truth of the character of Jay Gatsby, and if he was, in fact, a black man passing for white. Because, you guys, I was doing an episode of The Proud Family, and if you're not familiar with that show, The Proud Family is this very iconic cartoon from Disney Channel starring a black family, and the name speaks to exactly what it's about, representation and pride in being a black American. And the show has done such great things in terms of sharing diversity within the culture, from the Kwanzaa episode to taking us back to history and having it's just an incredible show that I grew up watching, and I'm so happy that when they brought it back in 2023, I got the opportunity to play a character named Maya, and Maya is very much so an activist. And in this particular episode that we were filming, it came across my lines that my character said, Jay Gatsby, is a black man passing for white. And just like my character, I stopped dead in my tracks and I had to research right then and there. I mean, it literally took over my whole recording session. And Ralph Farquhar, who was the creator of the show, told me, yeah, in fact, there are people in literature that absolutely believe that that's a fact about the book. And that wound me up to finding Janet Savage, who wrote a book on this exact theory, and I wanted to have her on the show and talk to her, so I'm going to talk to her a little bit later. But before talking to her, as usual, I got to go down this rabbit hole with my main girl, Sharon, honey. Hey, girl.
Hello.
How are you doing, Mom?
I'm doing fabulous.
So I got to ask you, have you heard of this theory?
I have not.
Wow, I actually found something that you didn't know.
No, I had never heard that before. I thought it was hilarious, especially when I heard you talking about that's why Jay-Z did the soundtrack or whatever. I was like, okay.
Have you read The Great Gatsby?
Of course, yeah. In school they make you read those books.
So what did you think of the book when you first read it?
I like the era of the Roaring 20s, you know what I mean? And then, obviously I saw the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, and I liked the vibe, but I never did get that guy. He was just so sad and so sullen.
Well, just to give a quick update to those, I know most of us know the book, but just to backtrack it a little bit, the fictional character of S. Scott Fitzgerald 1925 novel, The Great Gatsby, is Jay Gatsby, and the character is enigmatic, nouveau riche millionaire, and nouveau riche obviously is like a new rich person.
Nouveau riche.
Yeah, he's like new money,
right.
Who lives in a luxurious mansion on Long Island where he often hosts extravagant parties, and who allegedly gained his vast fortune by illicit bootlegging during Prohibition in the United States. And the character's biological details indicates his family are recent immigrants, which precludes Gatsby from the statues of an old stock American. Gatsby's rise triggers status anxieties typical of the 1920s era, involving xenophobia and anti-immigration sentiment.
I didn't even know all that.
Right. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to talk to Janet about it, because the book does speak to so many things that I think, it already has so many things that are clearly there. I definitely didn't see that. You know what I mean? Now going down this rabbit hole and getting into it, it definitely stands alone in terms of some of this stuff without him being black. But when I was just scratching the surface of if he was white passing and what that would mean and how that would directly correlate with someone like F. Scott Fitzgerald and where he stood in terms of race relations and just the book itself and some of the motifs in it just was insane to imagine.
Yeah. No, I mean, all that is very fascinating. I didn't know any of that. I just know in school when I read it, you have to read it and you talk about it and the teacher dissects it and then you sit there and you half listen or whatever like that. But, that is fascinating. Now I got to go back and watch the damn movie.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. I mean, even the fact that the original title of the book was Trimalchio in the West Egg, and I know I'm probably butchering that name, but the character Trimalchio comes from Roman literature or play, and that character was an ex-slave. That came into money, and then that was the original title that The Great Gatsby was supposed to have, and then in the book, Jay Gatsby is on 40 acres. Like the old 40 acres in a mill?
Yes. The more you talk about that, the more it makes you really, really think. that was the intention, that all these little hidden clues were in there and stuff like that. That's pretty cool. And if he was a black man, if obviously it's fictional, but if this character was a black man who was passing, that was dangerous.
Right, which is why we get the unfortunate ending at the end. Who, by the way, the person who killed him, Wilson or Buchanan, the people that were behind it, those were two names that are very popular in killing black folks.
You may not know this, but your grandfather was passing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be your great grandfather.
Right.
Was passing.
Yeah, I know
he
what you
was
mean.
a white man in Mississippi, Mountain Bayou, Mississippi, and he was the son of the slave owner. Wow. And he was passing. And he passed, and when his father died, he left him land. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was
not my great grandfather being Jay Gatsby. Yeah. Wow.
Oh yeah, no, he was passing, but he had to pass, and in those days, in order for you to get your inheritance or whatever was left.
But why did he end up being with a black woman? What made him do? I guess he just couldn't stay away.
Black women.
He just couldn't stay away. He said, I don't want this white man life."
Exactly. So he met Annie. That was your great grandmother, and they got married, and then that's
the rest is history.
The rest is history.
And that's why we're black.
Yeah, no, we're black with a little Irish.
I'm here for it, honey. Yes, my black card don't never decline. Okay, so I gotta ask you, Mom, when you're reading a book, do you immediately assume that the character is black? Or even moreover, when you're reading a script? Because I want to take it back because I remember when they were deciding to do the new Bad News Bears.
Yeah.
You spent like an hour on the phone with my agent trying to be like, but Tatum O'Neal character could be black. Yeah, but Billy Bob Thornton does like black women.
He dated black women. That's what it's so crazy because like when you're everybody always wants advice about entertainment and how you do it. And the main thing that I could tell anyone is just break the norms.
Yeah.
Let's just break the norms, because when I was talking to this agent about the Bad News Bears, which was a beloved story when I was a kid, I said, why can't Keke play the Tatum O'Neal character? Well, they're looking for a Tatum O'Neal type. I said, that's ridiculous. There is no Tatum O'Neal type. She's an individual. Keke, everybody's an individual. Why can't she play a little girl whose baseball coach is dating her mom? That doesn't have to have a race. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to have a race.
Yeah.
And I said the actor Billy Bob Thornton has dated everybody.
What I like that you said about it is the simple fact that they didn't even want me to audition.
No.
You know what I mean? And that feels asinine now. Now in 2023, I guess so much has changed. But back then, like the fact that I wasn't quote unquote a Tatum O'Neal type, meaning I wasn't white, they was like, we're not even going to send her on an audition. And I think it was so amazing that you fought for that.
Yeah, I just felt that it was just so stupid for them not to consider you at the time. You had just come off of a popular movie. You were a new face. And I just felt like that could have, some people might say I'm biased. Of course I am. But that to me would have been a new spin on the damn movie. And the movie came out, nobody paid it any attention, and they did, no disrespect to anyone, but they did exactly the whole repeat thing, and nobody paid it any attention.
But it's really cool what we did that with, that I didn't even know we did that with, what we didn't even have to fight about it. It was just kind of like, boom, what it was, is when I met with the creator and the writer of True Jackson VP, I mean, if you're asking me what somebody named True Jackson look like, I'm thinking black. You know what I'm saying? Right. I'm assuming black. But that obviously was not in the breakdown for the Nickelodeon show that I starred in, True Jackson VP. It didn't say looking for a little black girl. It was just like, hey, they doing a show on Nickelodeon called True Jackson VP, and it's about a little girl that becomes a fashion designer. But I'll never forget when one day I decided to ask Andy Gordon, who's an amazing guy.
Yes.
I said, what made you want to write a show about a little black girl? And he said, True Jackson wasn't black.
No, and we met her.
He was like, True Jackson. True is named after like my niece or somebody.
His next door
neighbor. And he was like, I just like the name, and she's not a black girl. But when I met you and you auditioned, I really liked you and I thought you were great. But it was not in my intention to write a show about a little black girl named True Jackson. I remember thinking to myself, like, first of all, Okay, that's a surprise. But then I was so gagged and thrilled that he didn't let whatever his original image of the real True Jackson, because
right.
real True Jackson she exists.
She really exists.
He didn't let that stop him from being like, well, I like her and she's good and she should have the part.
Right.
And I remember being so gagged by that because so many young kids, black, white, and otherwise, but definitely specifically black, were really inspired to see her as a character be the VP and get her thing done. And like I say, many people were inspired by True Jackson.
Right.
I mean, even just kids in general, because what kid doesn't like a show that makes them believe that their dreams are able to come true?
Yes.
But obviously, speaking as a young black girl, we don't often get many of those kinds of shows.
And so many people come up to me all the time and just say, your daughter inspired me. She, gave me the courage to believe I could do this or I could do that, and it did. And speaking of scripts, like, do I prefer scripts that are very much, you can tell right away this is a black script or whatever it was. I just prefer good scripts. I don't really care. You know what I mean? But I do love it when you're offered roles that can be offered to Jennifer Lawrence as well.
Sure.
Recently we've gotten some of those. I've been very happy about that. And I think those are great because that means that people are not putting you in a box.
Yeah. How do you feel about the reboots when they recast, when they do these different reboots and they put obviously people of different backgrounds in the roles?
I think it depends on the project. Like, for example, what's the Asian entertainer that you loved? Is her name Boa? Or she's a great dancer?
Oh, you talking about Boa? Yeah, I ain't you. And I ain't you. She used to eat these kids up.
Okay, there was a rumor. It was a rumor a while back that she was going to do a remake of Bodyguard. I thought that would have been dope.
What?
I think very believable. Yeah, so I just think stuff like reboot of that with a big icon. So this is my thing. I think that would have been good.
I'm here for the reboots with the different backgrounds, but I'm not here for the reboots with the different backgrounds and we don't acknowledge the background. I think that they're being very remiss with that. Yeah. If you're gonna do something, you're gonna make the character black. You're gonna make the character Asian. You're gonna make the character Jewish. You're gonna make the character Irish. You're gonna make the character whatever background. I think it's important that it doesn't feel like, well, we threw them in there, and that was our contribution.
You're saying you don't want it forced. You don't want to force.
Not even I don't want it forced. I don't want you to be lazy.
Yeah.
I don't want you to be lazy.
Yeah.
Don't be lazy. And I'm not saying you got to make the whole part their identity, but find a nuance in them being and why them being who they are in this role is an impact.
That's good because you could easily first of all, some things are iconic and they don't need to be redone. Like, I don't think Boys in the Hood needs to be redone. But you could do a version of Boys in the Hood in like a Boston with a all white cast, or you know what I mean? You can pick areas throughout the country. And that was the biggest eye opener for me is there was a movie that was done. I don't know if it was, maybe it was Ben Affleck. It was a movie that he did where he was like a criminal or whatever like that.
He always doing that kind of stuff. It was the one Uptown or something like that.
Yeah, but it was a movie where
In Town.
Yeah, it basically showed him in the hood in Boston. And that was eye-opening for me because I never had seen white guys in a hood like that. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And I was like, well, these white guys are acting like they're from the projects.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Right. I mean, they could be.
Yeah, and that was great for me to see.
Right.
That opened my eyes.
Well, girl, just turn on Jerry Springer. I can show you a bunch of them. But, that's my thing. I just think people got to stop being lazy. I think we absolutely need more diversity, need more representation in all regards.
Absolutely.
But I think when they just think they're doing their part by just putting a person of color, I think that's actually not true. You're actually doing a disservice when you think you can tell the same story when this person's culture brings a totally different nuance.
Without question.
Because Get Out is just Meet the Parents. But when you make it black, it becomes Get Out.
That's
you know what I'm saying? Like these movies, that's the beauty of making things diverse, is that you get an opportunity to see something from a different lens.
And you know what was
willing to do it.
Exactly. You know what was also great is in Lion King, when you had all those different voices, when you had the Whoopi Goldberg character, and you had the Leguizamo character,
Yeah.
you had all of those ethnicities together, and it came together. And you knew that was Whoopi's voice. You knew this was this voice. You knew, the guy
Yeah.
who played, and all of those different cultures came together and made that project. That was really dope.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think there's so many things that could be said with those kinds of, films. There's so many opportunities that are missed when people just, try to just throw some shit together. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay, Sharon, I loved having fun with you with this. But now I got to talk to my girl Janet Savage and get into the real nitty gritty. Baby, this is Keke. You guys, I am so excited to be sitting here with my next guest, Janet Savage. Okay, we have to have the best experts on the show. And quickly, I want to brag on Miss Janet because she's born in Chicago, obviously Midwestern girl. I relate because I'm also from the South Side of Illinois. Graduated from Stanford University and Harvard Law School, and also the author of Jay Gatsby, A Black Man in Whiteface, which is her first book of literary criticism. And it's exactly why I wanted to talk to her today. So thank you so much. I'm thrilled to introduce you guys to the author and lawyer, Janet Savage. Hi.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, first of all, you are so intelligent and amazing and incredible. I'm so happy to have someone like you on the show. So first I want to just say, what piqued your interest to talk about this topic with this book?
Okay, so it's funny because I was talking to somebody and just over her shoulder as she was leaving the room, and I don't even remember what we were talking about before, but as she was leaving the room, she said, well, Jay Gatsby is Black. And I'm like, what? So I immediately started Googling, and I saw that there was some chatter about it, some sort of ideas about it. And I thought, okay, when I have more time, I'll look into this. And then I got laid off at work, and I had time.
Wow.
And I said, well, I have time to read this book now about the letters between F. Scott Fitzgerald, the author of Gatsby, and his editor. Keke, when I started reading that book, the evidence of the scheme was obvious. And the more I read, the more I found. And I was just like...
So wait a minute. So what's so interesting is when I looked this up, and I think these were actually notes from your book. I haven't gotten a chance to read your book, but what it was when I was reading the article about your book, they were talking about how the original title of Gatsby was actually likened to a title of an old Italian not Broadway, but just theater show that was actually of the same story about a Moor who ended up getting, all his riches from his, former employer or master or however you want to call it. And it was literally kind of like a wink and a nod kind of deal. So when you were reading the editor's messages back and forth between F. Scott Fitzgerald, what did they say and how did you get your hands on that?
Well, there's a lot of books, right? He's very much a reviewed author. So there's a lot of letters. The problem is when you start looking at the letters, they're not necessarily completely reprinted in their entirety. But the title, this Trimalchio character is what you're talking about. It's one of the biggest, right? It's one of the biggest ways that I thought, okay, there's something here. Because Fitzgerald used to love fighting for his titles. Titles were very important to him. And he fought for this title called Trimalchio in the West Egg.
Yes.
So now we have to go back. Who's Trimalchio? Trimalchio is this character in a 2nd century Roman play. And the character is somebody who's like an ex-slave who's been freed, and he's gotten money from his former master, and he throws all these parties, and he's doing all these things that we know Gatsby does. And so I thought, well, that's very interesting.
Because why would he pick that title?
Exactly. If it's about a white guy, because, it's not for sure Trimalchio is a Black slave, but what is for sure is he is a slave. And if you're talking 1924 America, every free Black man walking around, as far as a lot of people are concerned, was an ex-slave, right? Yes. And so, this is a very peculiar thing to pick. Also, at the time that he was writing, somebody had commissioned that play to be a Broadway play. And there was this big fight in New York about it being obscene and all that. So Fitzgerald knew all that. And I just discovered that he actually had a dinner party with the person who commissioned that play. So this is all part of the stew of him creating this book.
That is insane. And so that makes me wonder, when it comes to this, because obviously Great Gatsby is a huge book. It's a huge, there's movies about it. There's so many things. And for me personally, I always thought, okay, it was good, it was interesting, but I didn't know why it was necessarily so, iconic and so, and maybe I sound unintelligent saying that, but to me, it was just like, okay, this is a great book. I'm wondering if this is a reality or this is a truth that was lost, as time went on. Meaning, would you imagine that people maybe in F. Scott Fitzgerald time knew this or felt this, and that was a part of the infamy of the book? Or do you think that was something that was completely lost on everyone?
Okay, so there's a lot of answers to that, but many people, not just you, say exactly that thing. They say, now this book makes sense.
Yeah.
But then you might ask them, why did it ever get cast as maybe the great American novel? And what I'm here to say is, in general, the book is about being an outcast. And everybody feels that. Everybody can sympathize with being outcast from the bridge club, from the school party, something at work. We all sympathize with that thing. We all sympathize with being disappointed. So on that very big level, it just resonates universally, right?
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I think what happened is the plan to have him as a mixed race guy was so subverted that it was hard for people to pick it out. And here's a very important thing to know. Fitzgerald himself said that even the people who liked the book, his best reviewers, had, and I'm quoting, no clue what the book was about. So for 100 years, something has been very wrong.
So, and obviously a lot of people have done their own history on F. Scott Fitzgerald and his relation to Black people, or where he stood when it came to racism, etc. And so in your personal research, as you started writing this book, what did you come to know about F. Scott Fitzgerald, the person, and maybe why he would hide such, something such as this in this novel?
Okay, so we're going to get back to the hiding, because I didn't think he wanted to hide it as much as his editors decided for commercial reasons he should. And that's a big part of the problem, right? Because he wrote a letter arguing for this title and a note that he wanted to put in the book jacket that they rejected. But more on that later, because it is important to know who he is. So
Yes.
with all the New York and Princeton and Minnesota and all the parties we have that are white Gatsby, right? He seems so white. But his sympathies are very Southern. He was a Southern sympathizer. He liked the Confederacy. He liked the racial hierarchy. So he's related to two very important people in history. And one is Francis Scott Key, who wrote the Star Spangled Banner. But Francis Scott Key was a fervent anti-abolitionist. He wanted to put people in jail. He wanted to jail abolitionists. F. Scott Fitzgerald was very happy to be named after him. Because at his core, he's a segregationist. That's really what he is.
Yeah.
But he's also related to this woman, Surratt, who was one of the people who was part of the assassination for Abraham Lincoln. And his parents wanted him to write a favorable story about her, and he refused to do that. but and the reason this is he is born from a mother and a father who are immigrants. The mother was a more recent immigrant from what they call the Black Irish. She wasn't Black. It's just a way of saying a very low class. But her family had made a lot of money in America. But her father's family had come over a longer time ago, so he could kind of claim to be old American stock. Still an immigrant, obviously, but he would claim to be old American stock. So what would happen is, as Fitzgerald grew up, he felt very embarrassed by having this, what he would see, maybe we don't, but he would see as a racial impurity. But he didn't know what to do, right? Because his mother's money kept them in fancy houses, but his father was a little bit of a derelict and failure. So Fitzgerald knew America from the middle, right? He is always trying to keep a toehold in that upper class, and he's very happy that he's white, right? Because that keeps him at least at the top part of it. But, he turned out to be very much of a sympathizer. He marries Zelda Montgomery. No, Sarah, I forget her last name. She is a very big family of a Confederate background. They romance and date walking through Confederate cemeteries.
Oh my God.
His first story, by the way, one of his first stories in high school was a fantasy about John Wilkes Booth getting away with Lincoln's assassination.
Hell no.
So he's really all about that. Not about necessarily lynching and killing Black people, but he is about making sure
The
they stay in their
hierarchy.
place. Yes.
And so, what is the personal evidence that he would actually write a book that, I don't know if it necessarily shows compassion, but really puts you in the seat, in the perspective of someone he ultimately despises? However, it's interesting because when you're talking to me about this, it also in so many ways sounds like him as well.
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you caught that. Yes. Toni Morrison wrote an article about this. It's very PhD-like and hard to understand. But it's about the complication when people start writing in this area because they necessarily put themselves in it and it becomes very convoluted. So here's the thing. We just talked about Fitzgerald wanting the social and racial hierarchy because having it keeps him from the bottom, but he also knows the pain and agony of it keeping him from the top.
Yes.
So some of that sympathy just seeped in. And he even said at one point, he said something like Gatsby started out as a separate man and then morphed into him. So he even says that. So you're
Wow.
right. It's a piece of that. But, he was very conflicted by all this stuff. There is a image on my book cover of a black and white picture. That's his own drawing that he sent in a letter to somebody saying, "This is my self-portrait." He felt very divided and
Wow.
maybe not fully white enough for his taste.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
and so I understand, like, people ask me that all the time. This is a very sympathetic character, but I don't know that he meant him to be so sympathetic. Because remember, Gatsby is a gangster. He is a liar. He's
Yeah.
a lot of things. He's a con artist. And in the end, he doesn't win. And I think
Yeah.
what Fitzgerald is saying is he doesn't win and he can't win because he has this polluted blood. And we're just lucky that we caught him. But it's a warning. The book is a warning about what happens when Fitzgerald talks about something called the terrifying fluidity of the social structure. What happens, the danger we have if those people can infiltrate the white society.
Wow. That is deep. That is so, that all of that. And again, I don't know if I've never ever heard like, I don't hear people talk about this book in this way. And I don't know if they have, and I've just missed the conversations. Obviously, you've been doing it for a very long time, and you talk about the PhD conversations and the, how people do this in college and stuff. And maybe if I had gone, I'd know this, but I've never heard of, people looking at it that way. I think most of the time it's quite surface. So now I want to go back to, your process of writing the book and proving, this POV. What evidence did you actually pull from the story? What were some of the key pieces in the story that helped prove this idea?
Okay, so you would probably not have learned this in college. That's one of the things I first want to tell you. People were not talking about it then. And if you were to come up with something new like this in college, you'd probably be shut down. I have a whole anecdote in the book about that because I came up with an idea about how to read this book. And the TA I had in my Fitzgerald class told me I was wrong. But now I know I'm right. So you probably would not have
It's critical.
learned it.
What my sister would call it, critical theory or critical thinking. I
Yes,
don't know what it
exactly.
is, but it's so
It really
good.
is. Right. And so this one guy, he's a Black professor at Medgar Evers College, and he's the only one he's the first one that I've ever found to say that he's a passing character. He just wrote his essay in sort of like, sorry, but PhD language, so I don't think a lot of people caught to it. But then when I started reading that book of letters and I started reading the book, I thought, oh, but I bet I can find between how the book was written and the text itself, proof of this theory that can be explained better.
Yes.
So then I started looking, and then I found all kinds of things. And here's something you have to know. When he wrote this book, Fitzgerald said he was setting out to write a book about how we live today, and it would be intricately patterned. All right. So a pattern is a repeating motif, right?
Yes.
All right. So when I started looking at the book with this angle, I saw Black signifiers repeating over and over again.
Like what?
Like what? Okay. For example, the very common thing is we talk about yellow cocktail music, right? It's a music that they played at Gatsby's parties. Well, that music is really a synthesis of European symphonic music and jazz. So it's like Gershwin. It's that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that's something like he's playing at his parties, right? And then there's things like how he looks. He has tan skin. Nobody else has tan skin but a golfer. Nobody. in that book. He cuts his hair really short. They keep saying they cut his hair so short. It looks like he cuts it every day. Well, that's what you would do if you didn't want to
if you're
show
trying to
anybody.
hide that texture.
Right. Exactly. And then they just use other things that you have to kind of recognize. Like he has that yellow car, and you know probably the term high yellow. Okay. So they also talk about this car as being swollen. That's a very weird word to use about a piece of metal. That's a weird thing. But it's not a weird word to use if you're trying to talk or suggest the idea of oversized black male genitalia. Right? It's just
Oh my gosh, this is so funny, but absolutely I know what you mean. It's so
right, you know what I mean?
It's so like you're saying, like my thing is, even if this isn't the thing, how incredible if it was, and the things that you're actually pulling from it that absolutely validate the POV. Was there anything in the book while you were going along your journey of trying to find ways that prove this theory that you said, okay, wait a minute, this doesn't, a description or something that kind of made you feel like, oh, maybe I've got it wrong, or maybe this is not a theory that I want to move forward with?
No, because what I would tell you is everywhere I looked, I hit pay dirt that supported the theory. Everywhere I looked. The fact that his house is on 40 acres, another one.
Yeah, that to me was huge. The 40 acres gag, I was like, yeah. I mean, you had me at the Trimalchio and the 40 acres, right? And then I could say someone could then argue, well, Trimalchio doesn't have to be black. Just like Fitzgerald isn't black, it doesn't mean that they don't know what it's like to feel an outcast or not pure blood enough. Mm-hmm. Okay, that might be true too. But what's up with all the jazz music and the 40 acres? What's up with all those elements? Those are so specific to black.
And what's up with the miscegenation talk? Right?
Go into that.
Sex between black and white people comes up 9 pages into the novel. As Tom, the character, is talking about how it's so bad, like these people of color are just going to ruin the world. It's a big threat, because there was a real eugenics book about that, and they mimic the book in the novel, and they give it a different title. So so wait a minute, so that's important. 9 pages in. And then the most important scene at the end, where they're in the Plaza Hotel and it becomes very clear that Gatsby has lied and he's not who he says he is, it's brought up again. Now, what's important to know is there's not a literary critic in the world who wouldn't say this about The Great Gatsby. Meticulously written. Every word matters. Economical. So now we have to deal with the fact that this topic has come up not once but twice. Right? So that's one of the big things. So that's what I'm saying. It's not just a theme. I think it's a big thing. So when Fitzgerald says you had no clue what it was about, he's not saying you mostly got it. No clue what it's about means you've missed something really, really important.
And that's what I'm wondering is like, I really wish that, obviously this is impossible, but when we talk about Fitzgerald, it's just like I want to ask him, especially when we talk about his past and his history and who he is why would you write a book with a passing black man at the helm? What was your reasoning? What was your, why would you do that? Or was it just because you're just a talented creative writer? Even down to the fact of his relationship with the woman. I forget her name now, but even the way that Gatsby was so obsessed with her, but just knew he couldn't have her. Mm-hmm. That speaks to race relations in such a major way.
Oh, it absolutely does. And again, I think he writes it because I think he is threatened.
Yeah, you did
He's
say
threatened.
that.
And I think he sees Gatsby this way. There's this place called Fort Taylor. And at Fort Taylor is the only place from World War I that they trained black soldiers. Gatsby was at that fort, and he likely saw those black soldiers. So you know who was there? I think it was Julian Bond's grandfather or great-grandfather, so a very probably light-skinned guy, right, was there. And I think Fitzgerald saw that guy who was going to leave the military looking just like him, in his suit and all that stuff, with all of his medals. And I think he really started, this is all speculation, of course, but I feel like he felt like, what happens when that guy just looks just like me?
But now I'm getting exactly what you mean now. Now that I've stepped back for a second, I want to go back to all the things you said, because I think I had gotten confused a little bit, with the idea that okay, he really likes segregation. I mean, we might as well just say he's racist. He wants, from what we know and what we've learned about F. Scott Fitzgerald, he's racist, and he is happy with the hierarchy that racism brings. I think when you said that, I immediately just assumed, oh, yeah, so why would he write about somebody? But now I'm understanding what you're saying in terms of the point of view would be a tale of what you shouldn't do. Because if you do, or if you do try to do what Gatsby's done or be this person, you won't make it. And that's why Gatsby doesn't win in the end. So now I'm understanding why you're saying what his reasoning would be to give a tale to those who think that they can conform so good they still won't make it out alive.
Exactly, Keke.
Wow, that is chilling.
And you have to look at who killed him. So he was killed by a poor white guy, George Wilson. But remember, you have the rich white guy, Tom Buchanan, who sort of like nudges Wilson into killing Gatsby, right? So that's, again, the history of the well-off white people having the poorer white people do their dirty work, essentially, right? But here's what you have to know. Buchanan and Wilson are the last names of two of our most racist presidents. So, again, why are you choosing those names?
You know why. Miss Janet Savage, you are a force. This is just too good. I mean, when you talk about other people that are in this field, literary specialists, etc., critics, what has their critiques been to your work? Because I'm sure there's been quite a bit of pushback.
Well, you know what? There's been a lot of quiet, but there's been a lot of quiet for 100 years. And here's the thing. When I started writing this, there was a moment when I just felt like I was the only person in the world, besides that one professor, who was willing to say that he was Black. If you look, though, through literature, people get close. They say things like he's maybe not ultra white. Maybe not, what does that mean? Like,
what is not ultra white?
Exactly. So there's people who kind of step up to it but never quite say it. And I just felt like I had to say it because I don't have tenure to lose. So I was just going to write it the way I saw it. And I think people are afraid to say it because you can't prove it, but you can't prove anything. That's true about any literary theory that you're saying. At this point, I feel like I have more evidence that he's Black than they have that he's white. I think his whiteness is an assumption.
Baby, this is Keke Palmer, yeah.
I mean, when they say this too, is like, what is it that we assume that every character in every book is white? And even moreover, why do we have to specify that someone is Black? I don't know. Do you have any particular thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think if you're reading older literature, like, pre-1950, you kind of assume the whiteness because of the access and the activities and everything that they were allowed to do that we weren't allowed to do. You can kind of assume it. But I think you also have to think that writers write about their world. And Fitzgerald said he wanted to write about the world that they live in today. And that world was beginning to be multiracial, multicultural. Because in the 1924 when they passed the first anti-immigration legislation. Jack Jones is having his issues with his white marriage. Like, all these things are beginning to happen. So, I like to say they talk about the 20s as the roaring 20s. I like to call them the raging 20s. They're very similar to today, where there's a lot of anxiety about peoples, especially in America, and how they are going to work together or not.
Yeah, I mean, it really gives Make America Great Again gag is what it really gives when we talk about, if we're looking at it from this lens, is the fears of things changing and how people are trying to contain the world and how someone could have used art or literature in this regard to still deter people from entering spaces where ultimately one feels that they don't belong. It's very incredible. Again, there has to be more to it for this book to have been so popular for all these years. If it's not about this, it needs to be, because it opens up a wide discussion for us to talk about how times have changed and all the different point of views that speak to that, and how people are pushing their narratives so subversively. It's insane. So that makes me want to ask you, are there any other major literary characters that are Black or that you think could be Black that we've assumed are white?
There's one in particular, and someone did a documentary about this in
I'm so
England.
excited.
Well, let's start by saying Wuthering Heights and The Great Gatsby are very similar books.
What's the name?
You have Wuthering Heights.
Wuthering Heights.
Okay. So it's written by Emily Bronte somewhere in the mid 19th century. And it's a similar idea where a boy, important that it's a boy, is brought into an environment in a society that he's really not a part of. And as he grows in that society and starts to challenge it by becoming sexual and becoming part of wanting to partake in commerce and all that, he's kind of expelled from that society and he goes away, makes a lot of money, comes back and wreaks havoc. So this is kind of what's happened in the Gatsby story too. Okay. So someone wrote this idea that Heathcliff, who's the character who's brought in to this white environment, is actually a black man. And I think they're right, because this is what I found out. In the story, he's brought in from Liverpool with one name, Heathcliff, right? Heathcliff, like Apollo, like Sam.
Oh my
one-name kid,
gosh.
right? Now, he's an urchin, orphaned, all that stuff. But here's did you know that Liverpool was one of the biggest players in the slave trade?
No, I
in the
did
world.
not. No,
And
I
that's why
didn't.
the International Slave Museum is in Liverpool, England. Okay, so now I'm like, well, this is very interesting that the father of this family goes to Liverpool, comes back with this guy who I think is described as swarthy, who then starts to have this relationship with a white woman. Things fall apart, the whole story. And there's a line in there where one of the white characters says, if you were a regular black ... or something like that. So I haven't completely gotten into it, but I think they're right. Because here's the thing. Writers write about what they experience and what they see. So I don't know why everyone thinks that nobody's ever going to write about the multiracial black-white conflict ever.
And my thing is this, do these writers ultimately leave out the fact that they're black because of they are not allowed to, or are they hoping that we use and exercise some critical thinking and do some of the things that you've done? Like, do you think that as a lover of books, that is what the writer is hoping that the reader does, is go on this journey and search and find out things such as you have?
Well, let's remember that in The Great Gatsby, Gatsby and Daisy have sex. So now, if you're Fitzgerald in 1924, you've written a book about that with what did you just call him? Sympathetic, likable guy. That's dangerous stuff in 1924. People were run out of town for that kind of thing, right? So I think it was very dicey to do. So they did it in this sort of clever way. Like, I'm going to leave all the breadcrumbs. You guys need to put it together. And the editor himself called it a book of ellipses, the ... where it's tells you some things, but he leaves the implication for you to figure out. And that's why I think there's a tonnage of these black signifiers in the book. He's coming at it in all these different ways because there shouldn't be that much.
It's so insane because I really do feel that it could so easily be one of those things that, some people knew about and some people felt, but just something that we know and we don't speak of, because I can't imagine that all these years people that were thinking and maybe having the same belief system as F. Scott Fitzgerald didn't read this book and feel like, yeah, man, I see what you did there. Someone had to, even if they just kept it to themselves. You know what I mean? It's just
I don't know, because there's this whole series in the book about this letter. So in 1939 or so, the editor returns to Fitzgerald something that he refers to as the Gatsby letter. There are a lot of letters between them, a lot of letters about Gatsby. But he's returning a letter that is like 15 years old. So what letter do you keep for 15 years that is so important that you, one, keep it, two, it's still so important that you return it to the sender? So I think it's in this letter where Fitzgerald is saying, but this is the scheme, this is the plan, this is what we have to do. And there's this book jacket note that I wrote that will help people understand it. And those things got X'd. And what the editor says is, you could have the title, but then you cannot have that note. And Fitzgerald's like, but if I can have the title, why can't I have the note? And I think the answer is because the note makes it very obvious. And we don't want to be run out of town. You don't want to be run out of town.
Wow.
Right? So I'm sure my belief is that his editor knew. And I think
Yeah.
the sub-editors knew. And it's part of my thing. Like, I'd like to track down like the children of those people to find out. Because there some people who knew, and now people always ask me this. Why didn't Fitzgerald tell people?
Well, why would he?
Why would he? Just in general, from the safety front. But the other thing is, he is on record as saying that he doesn't think that works of art should be explained this way. He doesn't want to explain his book.
Yeah.
He thinks he wrote
Yeah.
it, and you
Yeah.
guys just have to figure it out. And then, and to your point, there's a lot of things that are lost. Like, there's this theater in New York called the Belasco Theater, and at one point, somebody who goes to a Gatsby party refers to Gatsby as a regular Belasco. So what do you have to know? You have to know the Belasco was known for special effects and illusion and fireworks, right? And so it's one of those things that no one in 2023, or very few people, are going to know. But that was the hint that he laid.
Wow.
And I want to get back to something that you said that I also think is super important. You talked about there's no way out. You shouldn't dream of doing these things out of your system, out of your order. I think that is a very, very important part of the book. It comes up in many, many ways, and it includes those last lines. I think the book is about the fact that you were born a certain way and you will always be a certain way. And there is no dreaming or anything that can change that. I think that's the message of that book.
Oof, that is really, really dark and so interesting and intriguing. And I'm so happy that we have this book from you. I mean, you guys, obviously, I've just touched the surface, but the book is called Jay Gatsby, A Black Man in Whiteface. And it is just more of what we're talking about here, written, have information for days. So check it out if you like this bit of the conversation that we had. Janet, you're amazing. I'm so happy that you came on the show. I could talk to you for days. Your mind is so incredible. And I thank you for this theory and bringing it to the forefront and giving it life, because we need more critical thinking like this, just for people to talk about stuff. And really, especially with our old history, and our historical books, I should say, we need to be able to start, tearing them up and reading them from different perspectives. So I thank you for doing that.
Hey, you're welcome. I really have enjoyed it. And thank you so much for helping getting this word out, because that is my mission, is to change the conversation about this novel. And that all the people of color in America know that they have a place in this great American novel. They do. I think they're at the center of it.
Yes. Okay, Mom, it's time to end the show. And today we are playing Quickies with Keke. And what we're going to do is name famous literary characters we have assumed are white and actually see who would cast for them if they were black. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. What actor would you cast to play Harry Potter?
The black guy from All of Us. What's his name?
From All of Us?
Sterling.
From All of Us?
Yeah.
The show
not All of
with
Us,
Will
but
Smith?
all of the This is us. Yeah, whatever.
You would
know.
cast...
Us.
Mom, Sterling K. Brown is 40.
Oh.
Is Harry Potter?
Oh, you talk, but what age of Harry Potter? Little.
So
Harry
you're just gonna AI Sterling K. Brown to a child?
Okay,
Got it.
Wait, give me the ground rules again. Give me the ground.
Mom, Harry Potter is a kid.
Okay.
That's
so,
it.
All right, ask me again. Go
Who
ahead.
are you gonna cast as Harry Potter?
Urkel. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
A young. Young Jaleel White. I'm not mad at that. Sharon.
Yes.
Okay, what actress would you cast to play Matilda?
Oh, the little cutie. Marcella.
My gosh, Sharon, you're ready.
Yes.
Marseille Martin.
Yes,
You're ready, Sharon. You're ready.
I think she'd be adorable.
What actor would you cast to play Willy Wonka?
Oh, without question, Chris Tucker.
Wow, that would be good.
He would make a great Willy Wonka. And the Wiz. He would be a great wizard too.
Come on now. What y'all doing, kids? I mean, how did he talk? Yeah, that's right. Right. Okay. Yeah. What actress would you cast to play Katniss Everdeen in The Hunger Games?
I never saw The Hunger Games. I saw promos.
She's pretty much a kick-ass bitch. Jennifer Lawrence.
Oh, okay. Well, I can... Okay. Who would I cast to play her? Keke Palmer.
I was about to say, she don't cast me. This is not good. You have to cast me, Sharon. Okay, what actor would you have to play Jack Torrance from The Shining?
Oh, okay. That's the Jack Nicholson character, right? Ooh. I would say
Johnny.
I would say Sam Jackson. Samuel Jackson would
That
kill
is
that role.
pretty good.
Yeah.
That is pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, and last but not least, what actor would play Jon Snow from the Game of Thrones?
Okay. Help me with which character was he in the Game of Thrones?
You didn't watch the show?
I watched Edit. I didn't watch it. I watched Edit. What character was he?
He was the one that whose whole
little cute
family
guy.
was murdered.
Oh,
I thought Daniel Kaluuya. He be looking sad at you.
Daniel Kaluuya.
He be looking sad, like.
Oh, so it's a sad-looking actor. Okay.
No.
Or let me say, an actor who has the ability to
give you-
convey
exactly.
sadness.
Exactly.
Okay, well, I can go off of that. You said Daniel Kaluuya. Who else do I think is able to convey
Yeah, kind of has
sadness?
like a hopeless life.
I would say who does that very well is John Boyega.
Oh, he would also be a good Jon
Yeah.
Snow, and they both are British. We didn't even do that on purpose.
No, but they
And that show is British.
maybe well there you go.
You know?
Great opportunity to give the nod to the British, but I love my American actors too, but they don't look sad. So there you go.
Well, thanks for playing.
It was fun.
All right, it is the end of the road, kids, for this episode at least, but more coming your way next week, baby. Until then, you know it's your girl.
Baby, this is Keke.